don't forget, it's not just Hegseth and RFK and every other lunatic, frankly, who is problematic in terms of who's going to be heading these departments. And I will say this, that much of these people are figureheads. The real damage to most of these entities are going to be done by people whose names we will barely be aware of. Their deputies, their undersecretaries, the middle to upper management. So in some respects, I feel somewhat comfortable having these lunatics atop of these agencies. Having Betsy DeVos at the Department of Education was helpful insofar as she was a lunatic and could bring attention to what they were doing in the the Department of Education. And of course, she's not the one doing this. It's all the people underneath her. She certainly has no problem with what's being done, but it is helpful to have cartoon villains at the top of these places who are easy targets to, draw the public's attention to. This person, the director of national intelligence, I would imagine, is going to be more problematic for other people in government than necessarily like the American public. I mean, I don't know if there is a director of national intelligence that's going to, that normal people can be like, oh, this person's fighting for me, or fighting for U.S. Peace but
I agree, but it's might be a bit problematic if our director of national intelligence is, say, just in theory, a member of a cult. Like, that's pretty compromising, I would say.
Oh, really? Well, I don't know. Here's Tulsi Gabbard. Now, to be fair, this was a full 9 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
This is back when she was a Democrat. Here's Tulsi Gabbard in a video, August 2015, commemorating and praising the leaders of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. Interesting.
Those of us who are the spiritual children and grandchildren of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, would all be lost orphans were it not for His compassion and mercy. My Gurudev, Srila Siddhaswarupananda Paramahamsa, has said that while we will never be able to repay the debt of gratitude that we all owe Srila Prabhupada, what we can do is be pleasing to Him by always taking shelter in the holy names of Krishna. By taking shelter in the names of Krishna, we too may become lovers of Krishna, whose lives are motivated by compassion and love for others. My dear friends, in this way, with the sweet names of Krishna always upon our lips and in our hearts, we will always be able to transmit the transcendental nature and glories of Srila Prabhupada's journey to the United States of America and the Western world. So on this historic and auspicious day, we should take this opportunity to beg for the blessing of Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, so that we too can taste the nectar of love for Krishna and be motivated by compassion to use our lives working for the spiritual and material well-being of others.
So, okay.
Except Muslims.
Again, except Muslims.
Except for Muslims, yes.
You get the sense of the vacancy behind her eyes there. So, we've had Mike Preisner on to talk about this, and I just really think that the cult element of this is not being discussed enough with her. So I guess she and her family are a part of this thing called the Science of Identity Foundation, which was an offshoot of the Hare Krishnas. And I think they actually rejected Science of Identity because it was this guy named Chris Butler who renamed himself something else, and that's who she's referring to in the video, who has been accused of rampant abuse within this cult. Of children as well, showing them sexual material, and the underpinning of
virulently anti-Muslim LGBT
and anti-LGBTQ. But why when people talk about in the mainstream media, like, oh, she loves authoritarian dictators or whatever. It's such a small sliver of what the reality is. It's because she's a part of this organization that is virulently Islamophobic. So she doesn't didn't like Assad for reasons that were anti-imperialist or whatever. The reason that she doesn't speak out about the genocide in Gaza is the same reason that she was supportive of Assad. It's because she's okay with slaughter as long as it's against Muslim people. She also was in favor of the torture regime under the Bush administration. She was doing media tours under Obama about how he wouldn't say radical Islamic terrorism. Yeah. So the two things really that motivate her, if there's anything, because like you see how it's just, there's not much behind there. But it's Islamophobia and it's LGBTQ hatred, and it's all from this cult, which one's... Yeah.
You're forgetting the nectar of love of Krishna.
You're right.
Three things that motivate her.
Again, they rejected her...
I want to just say
crew.
That listen, cults are particularly nefarious in the way that they warp the brains of people in them and turn them into weird authoritarian, and it's very difficult to deal with even coming out of a cult, never mind staying in a cult, in terms of what it does to your worldview and your ability to function within society. It inhibits your ability. But let me also just say, and this isn't in her defense necessarily, but it's to be even-handed. I also think that J.D. Vance, as a member of either Opus Dei or Opus Dei adjacent TradCon Catholicism, is also just as twisted. The authoritarianism that comes from religious fundamentalism, you want to call it authoritarianism, you want to call it, ultimately patriarchy, or some form of like religious fundamentalist hierarchy. This is all bad things. These are all bad things to have in if you are someone who cares about democracy, if you're someone, and I don't mean like, Disney World democracy, but I'm talking about sort of like input and a sense that everyone has some measure of sovereignty, and that the government should in some way reflect the will of the people, as opposed to a bunch of in loco parentheses. We just had someone on to talk about Opus Dei, so it's not about Hinduism as a religion, it's about cults and that kind of mentality and what that breeds, and the compromised position that puts people in if they're going to be in high levels of government, like the director of national intelligence.
Yeah, I think like the effect being in a cult has on your intelligence, maybe not want to be director of national intelligence. I don't know if this is true, but it's something that I wish I could tell Michael, because I think he'd think is funny. Anil Dash, who's been in the studio actually for the Two Dope Boys show, tweeted out, Gabbard has no South Asian ancestry. Nobody in her family does. They're all just members of this cult and fetishize their version of Hinduism. She regularly blurs this line, lets people misinterpret her first name to imply that she's a member of our communities, but she's not. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it is, if true, funny to me that I didn't suspect that at all, but she's a big fan.
And would be keeping with said cult leader's teachings, Chris Butler, who renamed himself something that would be a bit more appropriating. Yep.
Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.